Good stuff. Cool. So, yeah, I've probably talked to you guys a little bit about this here and there when just giving suggestions about food or, reading ingredient labels, things like that. So I think this will be a really good educational topic. Yes, throughout your fitness journey. Yes, while like tracking food and everything, but also just throughout the rest of your life. It's always good to make sure that we have education to pass down to our kids and to just be able to make like conscious decisions about our health forever. So let's just get into the types of sugars and sweeteners that there are. So the first one, highly refined sugars. These are basically, it's just high fructose corn syrup. So if you've ever heard of that high fructose corn syrup or seen it on the back of an ingredients list, I don't say this often, but that is just straight up not good for you. Like just try to avoid that. And like I said, I really don't say that very often to like completely try to get rid of things. If there's anything that's like straight up not good for you, dog, it's this. Usually you'll find it in things like soda, sauces, like, ketchup and whatnot. If you just like read the back, you'll be like, what the hell? Why is that the second ingredient next to tomatoes or whatever? Things like fruit punch or candy, things like that. And then we have artificial sugars. So this is where a lot of you guys, are probably running into things like this. So sucralose, which is also known as Splenda, aspartame, which is also known as Equal. I think you say this saccharin. I don't know if I say that right. Saccharin. That's sweet and low. And then sugar alcohols. Okay, so these are the things to kind of look on the back of ingredient labels, and those are when it's an artificial sugar or something that makes something 0 calorie, but it's sweet, or make something sugar free, but it's sweet, things like that. And then third, we have natural sugars. These are things like fruit, monk fruit, honey, dates, and all other carbohydrates. So even things like, potatoes and veggies and rice, they break down in the body as sugars. So sugars are carbs, carbs are sugars. Okay. What these consist of are sucrose and fructose. However, just like high fructose corn syrup, it's very different though, much lower percentage of that in fruit and honey and things like that, to where it's not harmful to the body. But that extremely high dose of fructose is where high fructose corn syrup comes in. That's when it's not good. But there's the sciencey side of things. And now let's really dive into artificial sweeteners. The 0 calorie thing is the fake sugar sort of idea. So these are linked to many health problems, including migraines, depression, IBS, bloating, weight gain, and more. I personally really, really experience bloating with things like sugar alcohols and sucralose and sugar-free things and whatnot. And I know a lot of my clients do as well. And when we cut these things out, sometimes we notice we don't have as bad as migraines or IBS symptoms, things like that. They also provide no sense of fullness or satisfaction, and they retain the taste buds to require more and more sweetness. So I think that's what they train. They retrain the taste buds. They're basically more highly addictive than just regular sugar. They're a couple hundred times more sweet than sugar itself. So I recommend keeping these at a minimum. These are not the things that I would say that you need to completely cut out or completely avoid. In general, Americans can use less sugar overall, whether that's artificial sugars or real sugar. In general, we would all benefit from a little bit less sugar. And again, that's not cutting it out. But one of these, I would say, maybe 1 to 3 artificial sweeteners throughout your day. It kind of depends on where you're at. If you're noticing that you're having sucralose and everything, whether that's you get a skinny vanilla latte in the morning and then you have a Dannon Light and Fit yogurt, or then you have a Alani, those are full of artificial sugars, things like that. If you have a bunch of those throughout the day, then I would say maybe just start to like kind of add up and see where you're at and start to limit just over time. And yeah, most health products like protein powders, protein bars, energy drinks, pre-workouts, skinny syrups, Halo Top, these are the things that have artificial sweeteners. So as exciting as it is when we find this ice cream that has 300 calories per pint and it tastes so good, and we find this, new Alani flavor that tastes so good, or whatever, or this really low calorie Starbucks drink, just so you know, like that's what's in it. And again, it's not the devil, but it's maybe something to just be a little bit aware of. And if you have any digestion, bloating, or migraine issues, this could be the component. And it also is leading to weight gain because of how much it keeps you craving more sweet things, which I'll dive into deeper. But yeah, get familiar with reading nutrition labels for things like sugar, alcohols. So the sugar, alcohols will be on the nutrition label, like underneath fats, carbs, proteins, all of that. And then in the ingredients labels is where you'll see things like sucralose or aspartame. All right, so now just regular sugar. Sugar isn't inherently bad for you, but overconsumption certainly is. This is where added sugars come into play, which again, added sugars is on the nutrition label with calories, protein, carbs, fats, sugar, alcohols, added sugars, things like that. So that's where you know to find it. Added sugars are things that you probably think of immediately, like donuts, candy, bread, ketchup, sauces, whatever. And again, you can just look on the back and see where things have added sugars. And that's where I think sugar overall got a bad rep, is when things get added sugars to it. That we probably want to limit, probably not, want to go too crazy on that. That can lead to health problems like insulin resistance, high blood sugar, cavities, diabetes. So, everything in moderation is kind of the overarching theme here. Removing natural sources of sugar from your diets, like fruits, dairies, grains, honey, maple syrup, is not recommended. And again, what that is cutting out carbs. Wouldn't do that. Natural sugars like dates, honey, oats, stevia, dairy, molasses, maple syrup, and fruit, they contain the natural sugars. And these things also have nutritional benefits like fiber, minerals, vitamins, antioxidants. So hormones in sugar. I kind of already mentioned one, but insulin. You guys have maybe heard of insulin before, but it is a hormone, just like all the other hormones in your body that you probably think of, like your sex hormones, like estrogen and testosterone and whatnot. Insulin is a hormone that regulates the amount of glucose in the bloodstream. Glucose is sugar, okay? So sugar is glucose, glucose is sugar. So it regulates the amount of sugar in the bloodstream. When we eat, specifically carbohydrates, we experience a rise in blood glucose. So when we eat carbs, our blood sugar rises, and insulin is what balances that out. If we didn't have the correct functioning of insulin, we could die. That's where diabetes kind of comes into play. If you eat something with sugar and your insulin doesn't regulate the blood sugar that it turns into, then a high content of blood sugar is toxic. Brain neurons. So when you say the word neurons, people usually think of your brain, like things like firing and whatnot. But you also have body neurons that go through your spinal cord, and that's what makes me be able to raise my hand or, move my hand off of the stove if it's hot, things like that. So brain neurons and body neurons, what is that called? Where they fire together more rapidly because they run on sugar, also known as glucose. It's the preferred source of energy for the brain and the body. And just an example of kind of like how important that is the precision of the visual cortex of the brain. So things like reading, recognizing faces, seeing lines, that's all dependent on glucose in the brain. That is sugar, as well as learning, moving, lifting, running, yoga, things like that. And this type of, sugar and glucose ideally would come from the natural sugar sources, like we've mentioned before, keeping in mind that these things are not going to be coming from artificial sugars. So sugar in the brain, this is one of my favorite slides. When you've had something sweet in your mouth, and that doesn't matter what it is, whether it is sugar, whether it's artificial sweeteners, whether that's, just fruit or a sweet drink, sweet coffee, whatever, it changes your perception of food in general. But also it changes your perception of sweet food specifically. So basically it increases your cravings. When you have sweet foods, you'll probably just crave more sweet foods, but you'll also just crave more food in general. And it's, proven that it literally changes your perception of food. So sugar, sweet taste strongly increase dopamine. You get that like extreme sense of like kind of happy motivation. I want to do something. We're just like kind of, rats that are chasing after something and really motivated by dopamine. So that's released, and dopamine also requires or causes a motor behavior, meaning that your body will physically act it out. So not just your brain, but your mouth will start salivating, your hands will start reaching for the cookies, things like that, which I just find so interesting. So, and this is especially true through sweet liquids. As I was doing research through this, it was especially about sweet liquids. So when I think of that, I think of like really sweet coffees or energy drinks, or whatever it is, the sweet drinks that you're having. And then this is the really interesting part, is that artificial sweeteners are 2 to 700 times sweeter than sugar. And if you think of that, like even something just being 1 times something else, or 2 times, so being 200 to 700 times sweeter than sugar is really where it starts kind of getting messy with the brain. So what do I recommend? I recommend to choose sweeteners like stevia, monk fruit, date sugar, fruits, honey, agave, maple syrup, things like that. And then, kind of like I said, as far as high fructose corn syrup, skipping sodas, but then also diet sodas, because that's where a lot of extra artificial sugars would come into play. Energy drinks, sweet tea, fruit juices. And again, not cutting it off or avoiding completely, but just limiting. I definitely still have some of these things here and there, but I also know that when I have these things, I'm kind of prepared to crave sweeter things afterwards, or to feel bloated afterwards. And that's okay. A lot of times, I'll have clients send me a picture of something and I'm like, I would eat it. I do eat it. I don't think it's bad. Just be prepared that you might feel bloated afterwards. That's it. It's not going to kill you. Maybe it will eventually. Use a whole fruit as a sweetener as well, like a mashed banana in oatmeal. That's always a good thing. Or blended dates in a smoothie. Always choose for something like that as like your first source of sweetening things. And then one of the most important things too, I've been posting about it a lot on my story, and I've kind of shared this a couple times in different check-ins and whatnot, but really important to start your day off with savory, high protein and high fat breakfast. So if you're starting your day off with, a skinny vanilla latte from Starbucks or just at home, or you're always starting off your day with cereal or a smoothie or just sweet things, even if it's like, sugar, or if it's like a Greek yogurt parfait, I would just really try to have your day start off with savory foods. That's also been proven a million times, that if your day starts off with sweeter foods, that you crave sweeter foods throughout the rest of the day. And I can totally attest to that. Like the other day, I'm living with my mom right now, and she stopped by and got Dunkin' Donuts for us in the morning. The rest of the day, I'm craving sweet stuff for real. So that's why I like to start off my day with eggs, avocado, anything like toast, things like that, savory, sausage, smoked salmon, scrambled tofu if you don't like eggs. There's so many savory options, and I would just try to choose that, and then save kind of your carby stuff or your sweeter stuff throughout the rest of the day, which is totally fine. But notice if you notice a difference throughout your cravings throughout the day. Okay, that's all. That's my presentation. I always feel like I just did like a school presentation. I just ended. Any questions, comments, concerns, something you found interesting, or any kind of further research that you want clarification on?